A bill for tougher punishments for juvenile car thieves is being watered down. Why some lawmakers want kids to avoid charges on their first offense and the mixed reaction it's getting from residents.
Putting them in too much trouble right then, it's gonna set them on the wrong path.
And if he's getting away with it, then, you're teaching him to be a criminal.
Literacy takes center stage in Maryland schools.
They move from learning how to read to reading to learn.
Fox 45 News Project Baltimore examines why third grade reading is crucial for your child's future. Police statewide battling a critical officer shortage. Why a former U.S. Marshal blames lawmakers for slow recruitment.
If I was a young man, I would not choose law enforcement.
Then continued frustration over the city's costly bike lane plan. New tonight, we take residents' concerns to mayoral candidates.
I think we need to rethink where we place these.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Residents across Maryland voicing frustration with juvenile car thefts for months, but changes to a juvenile crime proposal in Annapolis could make it harder for some young people to face criminal charges.
So what we're envisioning is that a police officer takes them directly into a diversion program. It's certainly a lot more than we're doing right now.
What you're seeing over and over as the bill gets watered down more and more is that there are no real tangible boundaries around the system.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Bubala. Kai is off. Tonight, team coverage of the proposed changes to this bill. Keith Daniels looking into how the community is responding. But we begin with Mackenzie Frost and the fallout in Annapolis.
It was a spirited debate on the House floor today, lasting more than an hour. Now, kids who steal a car for the first time, depending on their age, might not face charges. And as this proposal continues to evolve, more criticism and concerns emerge about the possibility of this plan getting watered down. In late January, top Democrats making it clear
we must hold our state and our local agencies accountable for improving the juvenile justice system.
Juvenile crime is a top priority for this 90-day session. But in the weeks since first announcing the bills, several changes have been made. Right now, kids under 13 can only be charged with violent crimes like rape, murder, and carjacking. The original bill, as introduced, called to expand that law, allowing juvenile offenders between 10 and 12 years old to be charged with animal abuse, firearm possession, third-degree sexual offenses, and car theft. But now in the House, that list is shorter, only requiring kids accused of stealing a car to be sent to a diversion program for their first offense. The Senate version of the plan is similar, except it requires the child in need of supervision petition to be filed when the juvenile between the same ages steals a car.
Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
On the House floor Wednesday, passionate debate on various proposed amendments.
Clerk will take the call.
Like one calling for more parental rights in the juvenile interrogation process.
I am struck by the fact that almost uniformly, the law enforcement community who is dealing with the juvenile crime issues confronting our state today has suggested that we need to do something to reform the juvenile interrogation system. And that's what this is intended in. And that's all it's intended in. It's simply to provide a little bit more balance.
I ask you and implore you, please vote against this amendment. We do not need a Central Park 5 in Maryland.
Chairman Luke Clippinger, who has been leading the effort in crafting the language,
So what we're envisioning is that a police officer takes them directly into a diversion program.
argues requiring participation in these diversion programs is enough to change behavior. The diversionary programs might not be enough. Why not automatically give DJS the supervision or the jurisdiction to handle this, especially when we're seeing car thefts continue to rise?
I think that we, by providing that first step, and by saying, if this doesn't work, okay, well, here's the juvenile jurisdiction that's there.
And while some Republicans view the changes as a compromise,
what we're dealing with in the current law is not okay. And we have to get something through to make it better by the end of session. And I don't agree with it. I think that those things should still be in the law, but these are just the compromises we have to make.
Others, like Delegate Robin Grammer, argue the accountability teeth being stripped from the bill. Do you think that requiring the diversion program for the first offense for car thefts is really sending a message that there are consequences for behavior?
Yeah, I think the Democrats have really been jawboning the accountability word, and I think what you're seeing over and over as the bill gets watered down more and more is that there are no real tangible boundaries around the system.
Grammer says he's concerned about what kids might do next, and this proposal won't help.
What if next the next big thing on social media is keying cars? What if it's slashing tires? That's not going to do anything. If a certain category of crime explodes, we're not prepared for that, and this bill doesn't prepare us for that.
The reaction already intense.
I'm very concerned that the Senate bill has removed motor vehicle thefts.
Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy says the diversion program framework is not in place statewide, and without clear consequences, kids' behavior may not change.
No one is offended by giving young people treatment, but DJS doesn't have the resources nor the programs, and instead of holding children accountable for, in many instances, increasingly violent crime, we're putting them into a system that cannot deal with the numbers of children that are being forwarded to them for treatment.
The House version of the bill moving forward.
The amendment passes.
Expected to come up again for a final vote later this week, with all of the changes included. The Senate is expected to vote on its version of the plan on Thursday. Meanwhile, Governor Wes Moore says he believes that the conversations right now surrounding this legislation are in the right place, reminding lawmakers that anything that lands on his desk must center around accountability. In the State House, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Police and prosecutors argue people are taking advantage of the state's youth crime laws, knowing juveniles either won't be caught or they won't face serious charges.
Kids get out of the car, and the minute you stop them and you pull them aside, the first thing they say to you is, "Are you going to call my mother?" Because they know they're not. They know they're underage, and they know they can't get in trouble.
I think one of the things you see criminal organizations able to use juveniles and to say, "Hey, nothing's going to happen to you in the first place, so we're going to direct you to do that type of behavior."
Well, some community members support amendments to the car theft code, saying diversion programs could benefit young offenders in the long run. But others argue the state's juvenile facilities aren't equipped to put children back on the right path. Fox 45's Keith Daniels joins us live with this debate. Keith?
Well, Mary, as you know, a debate is driven by 2 points of view, what each side believes. And tonight, we're hearing from some residents over the issue of young offenders and car thefts. A rainy day in Baltimore City. Just as gloomy for some residents, their outlook on the juvenile crime bill that's working its way through the legislature in Annapolis. For these drivers, the driving point, juveniles, namely 10 to 12 years old, who steal cars, and the penalties young offenders should face.
1 year in juvenile. 1 year.
I want the kid to be helped, but I want to see restoration.
I don't want to see him go to jail. I don't want to see a 12-year-old go to jail with adults.
It depends on the needs of the juvenile.
Lawmakers say the bill is aimed at reforming the juvenile justice system. They're tooling over a measure that would allow juveniles under the age of 13 to be prosecuted for certain offenses, including vehicle theft. But with the change now, only requiring children 10 to 12 years old to be sent to a diversion program for their first offense. For some, a watered-down approach to accountability.
Because kid criminals become adult criminals, and if he's getting away with it, then you're teaching him to be a criminal.
There you go.
But Kenji Scott,
we're not talking about grown men here. We're talking about little boys.
A community activist and former president of Maryland's Juvenile Justice Coalition, advocates services over jail cells for younger offenders.
The realism is this: no 10-year-old normally steals a car. So if a 10-year-old is still in a car, there must be an issue there. We don't. Because when you talk about accountability, when you talk about holding children accountable, you hold them accountable through services. So the problem is the state has not provided the appropriate services to these kids, and now they're telling us we're going to provide services that don't exist.
Well, some lawmakers insist the services do exist and young offenders should be able to get the rehabilitation they need. We're live tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Hey, thanks. That brings us to our question of the day. Should juveniles face criminal charges for stealing cars? So far, 99% of people who voted say yes. Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in. Another bill on the table would push to decriminalize certain disruptive behavior in schools, like threatening bodily harm against another student or teacher on school grounds. Supporters say it's important to address student behavior issues without criminalizing them, but opponents argue it is a safety issue for other students and teachers.
A student should not be treated like a criminal for simply acting out if they have not committed any other crimes. Students act out for many reasons. Sometimes they are not malicious and are simply misunderstood.
It's okay to have rules. It's okay to enforce those rules. Consequences are good. That's how kids learn. And if we're taking all that away and now putting all the onus on the teachers to be, now referees and boxing officials and all kinds of other things, it's completely unfair.
The bill would apply to any incident on school property, including sporting events and after-school activities. Fox 45 News is taking a closer look at Maryland Attorney General Anthony Brown's announcement of an organized crime indictment this week. Those crimes include murder, robberies, and carjackings, more than 80 incidents in total. All but one of the 6 suspects was under 18 at the time of the crime spree, although 4 are now adults. Community activist Euripsy Morgan says takedowns like this are driving the calls for juvenile justice reform in Maryland.
I wish I could say that it was an isolated incident, but I have a feeling that we're probably going to see more of this. And the reason is because, again, we have these policies that refuse to stop this behavior before it gets out of hand. All that these poor laws have done is given these kids the opportunity to rack up these charges.
If you feel your juvenile crime concerns aren't being heard, reach out to your lawmakers. House Speaker Adrian Jones and Senate President Bill Ferguson, 2 of the most powerful voices right now in Annapolis. Their phone numbers, email addresses right there on your screen. Powerful wind gusts tonight in the Baltimore region. You're seeing the wind whipping the flag outside our station on the left side of your screen, and a live look from Towson on the right. Let's get right to Chief Meteorologist Gerard Jabelli on this storm system.
Thank you, Mary. It has been quite an active one. We are not done with it, even though the rain has pushed out, which we can see the radar showing just about everything out of Maryland, now pushing offshore. But the winds have been pretty much howling. I've heard a lot of reports of lots of things being found on the road, namely trash bins, garbage, and all sorts of stuff like that. Winds have been gusting over 50 miles per hour. The last update from Baltimore had a wind gust 48, and just across the bay, we're still seeing them upwards of 40 miles an hour. 43 in Annapolis is our wind gusts. So we're going to continue to see this. The wind advisory in effect until 4 a.m. We could still see winds gusting to over 50 miles per hour. Now, that is going to slowly taper tomorrow, but get ready for some chilly air tonight. We're going to track the system a whole lot more coming up.
Gerard, thank you. The weather contributing to a few power outages in Harford County. A tree fell onto power lines near Joppa Road and Pulaski Highway, knocking out power to that neighborhood. And according to the BGE outage map, there are more than 4,000 people without power right now. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 10, the Baltimore City Police Department is nearly 600 officers short, and it's not the only department with hundreds of vacancies. Why one former officer says he would not want to be a cop today, and why he's placing the blame in Annapolis. Baltimore's plan to add bike lanes to streets across the city is falling flat, with many, including some cyclists. We pressed mayoral candidates on what they would do with the Complete Streets program. And right after the break, Project Baltimore looks into how missing a major milestone in 3rd grade could set you behind for the rest of your life.
Project Baltimore is sponsored by the Snyder Law Group. Don't just sue them, Snyder them.
March is National Reading Month, and the focus across many American classrooms is on early childhood literacy. As Project Baltimore's Chris Papps explains, students who struggle to read by 3rd grade could face lifelong challenges.
When it comes to children learning how to read, most experts agree the pivotal year is 3rd grade.
So they move from learning how to read to reading to learn other things.
Emily Mitchell is with Sylvan Learning, based in Baltimore County, Maryland.
If students aren't ready to make that jump, they get left behind really quickly.
Mitchell says the importance of children reading at grade level by 3rd grade has been understood for years. Because many students, she says, who fall behind by 3rd grade never catch up.
If they're close to 3rd grade level, they'll be okay, but if they're not, it has honestly lifelong effects.
Maryland's General Assembly in 2011 created a task force to study school dropouts and their impact on the criminal justice system. The report found a connection between 3rd grade reading levels and the adult prison population. The task force found 23% of below basic 3rd grade readers will likely drop out of high school. 23%. For comparison, 9% of children with basic reading skills and 4% of proficient readers will likely drop out of high school. The report then looked at Maryland's prison population and found 57% of inmates under age 25 were high school dropouts.
We want to make sure that we can get as many of our 3rd graders reading by the end of the year as possible.
If that's the goal, the question then becomes, how is it accomplished?
I think you can identify little ones that are struggling very young.
Dr. Carrie Wright is the interim Maryland State Superintendent of Schools. She took over in 2023 with a focus on improving reading proficiencies, something she's done before.
You know, we're living in a new era in public education in Mississippi.
In 2013, Wright was hired as the Mississippi State Superintendent of Education and presided over what's been called the Mississippi Miracle.
It's not a miracle. It's hard work over a long period of time.
The year Wright took over, Mississippi passed a law mandating every 3rd grade student must read at grade level before moving to 4th grade. These laws are often called 3rd grade reading retention policies. They say if a student cannot read at grade level, they either repeat 3rd grade or receive interventions to catch up.
For me, it's prevention and intervention.
According to federal test scores, in 2013, the year the law passed, Mississippi students scored on average a 209 in 4th grade reading, far below the national average of 221. But by 2022, the most recent year for results, Mississippi had passed the national average. Mississippi now scores a 217 in 4th grade reading. The national average sits at 216.
We need to make sure that all of those teachers have the skill sets that they need to diagnose those kinds of issues and the skill sets that they need to intervene in a very early age.
According to Education Week, 25 states and the District of Columbia either allow or require districts to hold back students who are not reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade.
The answer is balanced approach. If a school really doesn't think a child is ready for 4th grade, then it's not a terrible thing to hold them back, but they do need extra support when they go through 3rd grade again to make sure that they'll be successful the second time through.
I'm Chris Papst, and this is Project Baltimore.
In honor of National Reading Month, our parent company, Sinclair Broadcast Group, is partnering with Reading is Fundamental to launch Sinclair Cares Supporting Children's Literacy. The campaign will run throughout the month of March to raise awareness and help get books into the hands of children across the U.S. To kick things off, Sinclair is making a $25,000 donation. Find out how you can help by going to sinclaircares.com, and beginning March 1st, join our virtual book drive. Every $4 donation provides a new book for a child. A second victim dies following Tuesday's row home fire in Highlandtown. How the fire department is working to make sure a similar tragedy doesn't happen again.
The main character in the story of the Biden impeachment inquiry on Capitol Hill. I'm Christine Frizzau with what Hunter Biden told lawmakers and how they're responding.
The rain is gone, the wind is up, and our temperatures are falling and fast. We'll hit the 30s here in just the next couple of hours. It's going to be a chilly start to your morning commute tomorrow. We're going to talk about that. Also talk about what the next storm is going to bring us, when that one's going to hit.
And now you can watch Fox 45 News for free anytime on Amazon Fire TV or Samsung TV Plus. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments over whether former President Donald Trump can claim presidential immunity in the election fraud case against him. A lower court ruling from a D.C. court that says Trump is not immune from prosecution will remain in place until this Supreme Court appeal. Oral arguments are expected to start in late April. Well, President Biden's son Hunter appearing in front of lawmakers on Capitol Hill today to discuss the impeachment inquiry into his father. Hunter's business deals have been the focal point of the investigation. National correspondent Christine Frizzau takes us through today's testimony.
He's been the centerpiece of the investigation into the Biden family, both from House Republicans and former President Donald Trump.
Where's Hunter?
Hunter Biden, the president's son, spent the day on Capitol Hill, speaking to lawmakers who have for months been working to impeach his father in what he calls a partisan political pursuit, saying, quote, "You have trafficked in innuendo, distortion, and sensationalism, all the while ignoring the clear and convincing evidence, staring you in the face. You do not have evidence to support the baseless and MAGA-motivated conspiracies about my father, because there isn't any." It's a sentiment echoed by his uncle James Biden, who testified last week, but one that stands in sharp contrast to claims Republicans have made for years that the reason Hunter Biden was able to seal so many business deals with wealthy companies in China, Russia, and elsewhere was because of Joe Biden's powerful positions in government, particularly while he was vice president. They've also insisted Joe Biden financially benefited from the deals, citing these 2 loan repayment checks Joe Biden received from his brother. They say immediately followed payments from business deals.
The basis of what we've learned is that the Bidens didn't have a legitimate business. Their business was selling access to Joe Biden, the brand.
Democrats say the evidence just isn't there, especially after a key GOP witness, Alexander Smirnov, was just charged with lying to the FBI about the matter, with evidence he was being fed information from Russian intelligence sources.
They've got nothing.
I think it is extremely disturbing to see the lack of professionalism, the lack of grounding, and the abuse of public resources and abuse of public power.
This is, of course, separate from the Justice Department investigation into Hunter Biden. Special counsel David Weiss looking into tax crimes and a gun charge against him. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
I think the bike lanes, like everything else, should be driven by the community.
I think we need to rethink where we place these.
Baltimore mayoral hopefuls addressing bike lane complaints in recent months, the changes they want to see from the city. And police departments across the state continue to struggle to fill their ranks, while one law enforcement expert says the issue is out of the department's hands. We're following 3 big stories at 10:30. A 5th suspect named in the shooting death of a 2-year-old in Prince George's County. Why investigators say he should never have been in the country. Police departments across the state continue to navigate a significant staffing shortage. One expert pinning the blame on Annapolis. And more frustration from Baltimore residents who say their safety concerns are being ignored while the city puts in its multi-million-dollar bike plan.
They came in once and had us sign a petition. Didn't mention anything about a bike lane. I saw what I signed, and it wasn't this.
Well, Fox 45 News took those concerns to mayoral candidates taking part in a panel discussion tonight. Jeff Abel joins us live with their response. Jeff?
Well, bike lanes, as you know, have been a point of contention in many communities in this city. And tonight it appears many mayoral candidates are listening. When it comes to bike lanes, candidates at a mayoral forum tonight were driving their point home.
They need to be removed.
I think we need to rethink where we place these.
I think we really need to have some balance.
At some point, we have to be like, this way isn't working.
In some communities, the installation of bike lanes has left neighbors fuming. Bike lanes have replaced vehicular lanes. And in Remington,
I said to the community association that we were going to get hit, and they acted like I was crazy.
salon owner Laura Schneider says they've replaced valuable parking spaces.
Ultimately, we ended up losing about 16 spaces.
But the newly designed 28th Street in Remington is not only costing Schneider business.
As I was leaving, I saw brake lights all over the sidewalk.
But Schneider blames the newly designed road on a crash last month that sent a vehicle flying into the side of her salon. A crash she predicted after another vehicle crashed into her salon a year ago.
I just don't understand why it had to get so ugly before somebody was like, oh yeah, what's happening here is a problem. What's happening here is unsafe.
When you look at the average bike lane, a lot of people don't ride in bikes.
The way that things are going now, they're putting them everywhere. The roads are horrible.
At the mayoral forum tonight, many candidates were critical of the city's bike lane installations, especially in communities where residents insist their wishes were ignored.
We promised 77 miles of bike lanes in 2017, and we've only gotten 17 so far. That's a big problem when you can't even connect the neighborhoods that want bike lanes, and instead you're focusing on picking fights in communities that don't.
Would you call a moratorium on the current plan?
I would, depending on the funding, because you don't want to lose the funding, but I would reassess. And you've got to reach out and talk to the community.
I would put a moratorium on them. I would get the communities engaged.
There has to be a way and a space for bikes and drivers and pedestrians to be able to get along.
I think if we engage the community early on, we can get this solved. This is not rocket science.
Former Mayor Sheila Dixon tells us tonight that her bicycle was actually stolen right out of the garage at her home last week. We're live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Live in that win for us, Jeff. Thank you. A December poll from Lake Research Partners showed Sheila Dixon with an 8-point lead over Mayor Scott in the Democratic primary. Bob Wallace received 10% of the vote and 15% were undecided. This polling is from before Thiru Vignarajah entered the race. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates is backing Councilman Zeke Cohen in the race for City Council President. Bates says Cohen has set an example in how to change a community, praising his work to address substance abuse issues and public safety.
Police work is easy work if all the politicians and the oversight people and the oversight boards would just stay out of it.
Police departments across the state struggling to hire, and some experts point to policies in Annapolis making it a less appealing career. Fox 45's Vincent Hill joins us live with a former state police officer's perspective on the drop in recruitment. Vincent?
Yeah, Mary, well, you just heard what he had to say. Johnny Hughes says it comes down to politicians who know nothing about the job, assuming they know everything about it.
58 years.
It's a job he did for over 50 years.
Law enforcement is a very proud profession.
A profession his sons kept in the family.
One of them got shot up. The other one left the state police and went with DEA. Now he's a deputy chief at Bel Air Police Department.
But with the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, retired Maryland State Police officer and U.S. Marshal Johnny Hughes says,
all the oversight boards and all the impediments and stipulations, if I was a young man, I would not choose law enforcement.
That's when Hughes says drastic changes were made in Annapolis.
The General Assembly in Maryland gutted the Police Officers' Bill of Rights.
That bill protected police acting out their duties in good faith. But now, according to Hughes,
as a police officer, you can lose everything you have. They could take your home, your finances.
Another major change the 2021 law controls is when an officer can use force.
When you take somebody down, they're kicking and screaming and trying to bite you and spit on you and trying to grab your weapon. You have to take control of the situation. It's going to get more officers killed and more officers hurt.
Add it all up, and that's why Hughes says recruitment numbers are down.
You don't have as many recruits in the line to be hired.
According to the latest data, Baltimore City is 584 officers short, while Baltimore County is 262 short. And it's not just the Baltimore area.
Prince George's County, I think they're down around 300.
384 to be exact. Hughes says what we're seeing on the streets is a direct reflection of the law.
You're either going to have law and order or you're going to have chaos. And right now, there's a lot of chaos and the crime rate is way too high.
Supporters say the law is necessary to build public trust in police.
This legislation is not a step in the right direction, it's a leap. This legislation creates civilian oversight at every level of the administrative disciplinary process.
Hughes says those who supported the change should have walked a mile in a cop's shoes.
The politicians, many of them need to get out of Annapolis and ride around on a midnight shift or a late shift with a police officer.
And it should be noted, House Speaker Adrian Jones sponsored that bill to repeal the Officers' Bill of Rights. Senate President Bill Ferguson at the time called it a step in the right direction. We're live tonight in Baltimore. Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
Vincent, thank you. Well, BPD revamped its recruitment strategy in 2022, including a $5,000 bonus and a housing allowance for an officer's first year in the department. Law enforcement experts voiced their concerns, saying the benefits wouldn't be strong enough to boost officer morale. They also point to keeping politics out of policing.
You've got to have a unified operations. Let the police commissioner do policing and get the mayor out of that, because so far it's been a catastrophe.
The state-mandated BPD changed its districts last July. They're now based more off population and calls for service across the city. Police Commissioner Richard Worley says he's continuing to adjust numbers of officers in each district, but none of the districts are fully staffed. Baltimore police investigating a shooting on Hilton Parkway this afternoon near Gwynns Falls Park. Police say a 46-year-old was shot and taken to the hospital with minor injuries. The suspected shooter was captured by police. Anybody with additional information asked to call Metro Crime Stoppers. A second person has died following Tuesday morning's row home fire in Highlandtown. Fire officials say a 22-year-old died at the hospital tonight. An 8-year-old was also killed during the blaze. A third person was injured and is still listed in critical condition. It's unclear what led up to the fire, but more than 20 residents were displaced. The Baltimore Fire Department now working with Highlandtown residents to plan a fire safety sweep, installing smoke detectors and providing safety tips. Baltimore City Council members are starting to push for more transparency for the Safe Streets program. They will hold a hearing next Thursday to find out more about the program's hiring practices.
We've been asking questions for quite some time. There hasn't been a lot of answers. This is funded by taxpayer dollars, and so therefore, if there's questions about the program, they should be answering it, even if that money is going through a third party.
Fox 45 News has been investigating the program for years, and we have found connections between some Safe Streets workers and the BGF gang. But the city will not answer questions about who Safe Streets workers are. We have filed several public record requests, but each time the names are redacted. The mayor says the names are kept private because of safety concerns. However, the city routinely says the violence interrupters are credible messengers in the community and are known to neighbors. So we sent questions to the mayor's office asking if the Safe Streets employees are credible messengers in the community and people know who they are, why won't the city release the names to the public? And has Mayor Scott instructed Monzi to fully participate in the upcoming hearing with City Council, including outlining how violence interrupters are screened and hired? The mayor's office did respond to us, reiterating Safe Streets workers are not city employees, so their names are not public information. Taking a look now at the Fox Box, top left Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell stepping down from GOP leadership in November, ending his run as the longest-serving Senate leader in American history. Questions about McConnell's health began last year after 2 incidents where he appeared to freeze at press conferences. Top right, the execution of a death row inmate in Idaho had to be called off after prison officials say they were unable to set up an IV line for a lethal injection. Medical team members said they tried 8 times. 73-year-old Thomas Creech is on death row for a 1981 murder. The execution will be rescheduled. Bottom left, the FAA is giving Boeing 90 days to fix its quality control issues, including a door flying off an Alaska Airlines plane mid-flight earlier this year. Boeing says it's committed to making changes. One of its top executives stepped down earlier this month. Bottom right, President Biden is highlighting a decline in violent crime across the nation, but he and Republicans say more needs to be done to keep Americans safe. And that brings us to our national question of the day. Do you approve or disapprove of President Biden's handling of the issue of crime in the U.S.?